Alrighty, I am back. Then there are those who set up their own traps and are attracted to and attracted by false spiritual paths. For instance, if you're only interested in appearing to be spiritual, or just interested in spiritual trappings, like auras, psychic powers, channeling and such, then what we're saying here will not be of much interest to you. But there are plenty of things out there that will, and plenty of organizations and people who will take your money and your life. That is not to say that auras, etc., are false. Of course, these things exist, but they are minor parts of the more important whole, and they should be side effects, outgrowths, of an unselfish spiritual life. But I've always been fascinated by such things. In fact, I had some unusual abilities as a child. Is that wrong for me to be interested in them? No. But while you were interested in such things, were you not even more obsessed with finding real love, and people of kindness, gentleness, compassion, and harmlessness? Yes, now that I think about it, that was really my primary goal and drive. And that is why you had powers even as a child. Spiritual phenomenon should not be a primary focus of interest, lest they become stumbling blocks and a means of avoiding real spiritual development. And the only way you can have such abilities without abusing them and causing the effects of such abuse are to first become a harmless, unselfishly loving entity, one who will use or not use such abilities in a positive, creative manner all the time. You can force the development of such abilities with certain drugs, certain types of yogas, and many other techniques, but you will create problems for yourself and others. Powers come naturally to you from the universal spirit, when you have simply made yourself harmless and caring under all circumstances. To achieve this, you must first unselfishly use whatever normal abilities you have right now, in whatever situation you're in now. Just as an employer will promote a person who is excelling in working with the circumstances of his present position and demonstrating his readiness for greater responsibility, so does one advance in the universal company. What employer would promote someone who's doing a poor job, or promote someone who cheats and attempts to get more power before they've earned it? No sane employer promotes people unless they deserve it, and neither does God. So seek first to make yourself worthy through developing those virtues of unselfish love, like patience, humility, understanding, always considering the best interest of others before yourself. Then hold on to these virtues constantly, perseveringly, through your times of suffering. Such times are the testing times. When you have passed your tests, then will you be given whatever extra abilities you need, or material you need, as you need them for universal work, without even trying to get them. And that is why I seem to be gaining new abilities, even though I don't desire them. Yes? But what about the practice? We are taught methods of working in the other realms, and commanding such abilities and powers. These are not for you to personally use, Peniel. They are for making in you a better vehicle for the universal spirit to work through. The hierarchy knows when and what to do, and will use the abilities that you've developed when it is appropriate within the will of God. You just need to open up the channels so you can be used. When you are through with your training, you will have the ability to channel powers that can level great cities or move a mountain. But you are not to use such power. Just sit back, relax, and let it happen if it be the will of God, just doing it through you. and it may never occur, or it may occur daily. It is not for us to decide. Finding your true path. You said it has been foretold that I will present the ancient Atlantean children's teachings to the world. When I finally become an adept, a true teacher, and I do this, what should be the most important thing I should say about walking a true course back to the One? Was our discussion of just one important thing? There is much to say, but the most important ones, if you must limit them, are these. Remember the footsteps through the path of rose bushes. Tell them, pray for, and find a true teacher, detailed in the next chapter. Work on transcending your separate self. Be ever vigilant regarding your thoughts, and stop feeding the monster with your thoughts of selfishness and its illusion of separation. And practice the virtues of unselfish love with others of like kind, to displace selfishness and break the illusion of separateness. Yet there is much that people must suffer, much work people will need to do, and much they must decide inside themselves before they will even ask such things about their path to God. The spiritual seeker makes a series of steps before he even sets foot on his true spiritual path back to oneness with the universal. Obviously, they must first realize that they need to change, and need to break free from old programming and behavior patterns. Next, they need to realize they can change, regardless of how difficult or impossible it may seem. They must realize that they have free will, and are only a slave to their programming and selfish desires, so long as they allow themselves to be. Once a person gets to that point, then they must decide how and when they're going to go about changing. They must choose their path, and choose to stop walking their old path in order to start upon the new one. This process involves taking responsibility, taking real responsibility, responsibility for their own life direction, for a new life, and even more importantly, the ultimate responsibility, serving God and flowing with universal will. Zayn's words rang through me like being in the tower of a cathedral as the bells were ringing. But the separate self wants to prevent you from doing this, so it will influence you to procrastinate at any cost. It will use any and every excuse to keep you from taking responsibility, even using responsibilities as an excuse to avoid your real responsibility. I remember a great quote that an elder student of mine showed me from a book. I believe it was called Illusions. It was a fiction, and had a book within a book called The Messiah's Handbook. The saying went something like this: the best way to avoid responsibility is to say you have responsibilities. How true! I have seen so many seekers never evolve spiritually because they didn't want to break away from their responsibilities. They have jobs, commitments, contracts, relationships of all kinds, so many things that are more important than becoming unselfishly loving and serving God. The only real and great responsibilities. Or some will say they will start their spiritual path right away, just as soon as they do such and such first. Of course, they never seem to complete such and such, or there's always another such and such around the corner. So they never start walking their true spiritual path. There is a profound ancient saying that goes, "Seek God first, and all else will come to you." Nothing could be more true, and nothing is more important than finding God. So what if you become successful? What is it worth if you don't have real love and God in your life? So what if you did break such and such commitment? What was the commitment worth without real love and God in your life? So what if you didn't complete such and such? It is nothing compared to finding and serving God. All those things are delays, keeping you from changing, keeping you from being and doing what you are really supposed to be. They are all temporary things of this world, and they won't last. Neither will they matter in the end. If you died tomorrow, will they stand over your grave and say, "He worked hard, kept his appointments, and supported his ex-wife according to the terms of their agreement. His alimony will be missed. His jokes in the pub will be missed. But on with our lives." Or will they say, "You will be missed in this world. The inner light you shined was a lamp for me, and all who knew you. The love and kindness you spread changed my life, and touched thousands of souls who were enriched by your work. And in turn, some are carrying on the lamp, so it may illuminate the path for others. Keep a seat in the next plane warm for us. We will be with you soon." Some of you who read these are stragglers. You were already supposed to be, or are still supposed to be, leaders. You are fallen light workers who should have returned to the light before now, but you have allowed yourself to drag your feet and avoid your true responsibilities. You have very little time left to change yourself before the great changes are upon the world, and you become bound in darkness for ages. If you want to catch up, you must take rapid measures to attain the spiritual position you were supposed to have already taken. Or perhaps you are one of the survivors of the great changes, who are reading this years later. One of the many decent people who survived the changes are in the midst of them now, and the suffering is spiritually purifying you in spite of yourself. In either case, there is no time to delay. Every moment is precious. Don't squander it. There is no time for anything else anymore, except your inner work, or helping others with their inner work. Accept your real responsibilities. Drop everything now. Find your path and walk it now. Find your true teacher and get on with your transformation. Spend every moment of your remaining life in an all-out concentrated effort to change your life from one that is separate and self-oriented to one that lives to serve and manifest the universal spirit. The Great Affirmation. As we walk our path, we should let our daily affirmation or prayer to the Infinite One be, "Your will be done, not mine, in me and through me." And we should not just say it. We must feel it, live it. Practice this, and one eternal day you may find that God's will be your will as one, no longer separate. You will realize I am, and your actions, your lifestyle, your being will reflect this. Your life will be as one giving like an endless stream of universal love flowing forth, rather than the empty, short-lived, endless circle of wanting, trying to get, and fear, trying to avoid. Chapter 13. Teachers and Students. Backing up a bit. While this chapter comes late in the book, the part of it that is my personal story really begins very early on, both before I went to the monastery and in my first days and weeks there. I was at the very least naive about many things, and you may also find a great deal of sarcasm and egoism in some of my early questions and comments to both teachers and elders, as I had not yet realized the wonderful virtue of humility. The ancient texts are clear and consistent. Find thyself a teacher. This is an old and time-proven growth method in many good spiritual traditions around the world. It is even still to be found in the Talmud, with somewhat different meanings and applications these days. So what is a teacher? It can mean many things. Let me start by saying there is a big difference between what we call a true teacher and other things or people that seem to be teachers. What I mean is that there are lots of teachers, guru, preacher types, that want followers. They want prestige, praise, worship, money, or a mix. Some want you to praise or worship someone or something else, while they ride the coattails, as being a representative of what you're supposed to be worshiping or praising. Some want it directly themselves. But a true teacher doesn't want any of these things. He teaches with his life primarily, and kindles you through his unselfish love. He will accept good students to teach them how to change. He will teach philosophies or techniques to help you change, and is a facilitator of change that a student can use like a tool. But he wants no blind or mindless followers, no worship, no praise. Anyone who does is not what we will refer to here as a true teacher. In our particular tradition, the children of the Law of One, a true teacher must be enlightened, having experienced the death of the selfish separate self, and lives in total harmony, oneness with the universal spirit, and is a servant of universal spirit, and vehicle for its universal will. Elders can also be teachers, but it isn't quite the same as the true teacher. The words used to describe such a being, and the practices of other traditions, obviously vary, but the end result should be the same, which we will detail in a moment. First, a word about worship. Worship is a very noble appearing way that the selfish self uses to avoid personal responsibility, change, surrender, and its own separate self-demise. People take all the best qualities and ideals and personalize them into someone to worship, rather than becoming that themselves. They idolize rather than idealize. There is a big difference. There's more info about ideals and using ideals in another chapter. Idealizing just sets a standard of change for you to shoot for. The self prefers idolizing and worshiping because that way it avoids the hard work and self-sacrifice required by surrendering to God and serving God. Speaking of which, many people don't like the idea of having a spiritual teacher or guru type in their life. I know I didn't. Often this is for a good reason. There are many charlatans out there, but there are some saints too. And the real reason most people don't want a teacher is because their selfish separate self knows it is the beginning of the end of its control and life. And as far as charlatans, what you get or get exposed to personally mainly depends on you and what your motives are. If you just want to mess around or seem spiritual or think you are spiritual, then you'll end up worshiping a charlatan. But if you really want help to become truly spiritual, kind, caring, harmless, giving, then you'll find the real thing and use their example as an ideal. Many people are taking courses, going to seminars, classes, and channels that are conducted by charlatans, and they're perfectly fine with it. It's the real thing people are afraid of. Essentially, you get what's coming to you. You get what you deserve, or, to put it more accurately, you get what you were really after inside, whether you know it or not. I wasn't looking for a teacher when I went to the monastery. I was just looking for a place where everyone was kind, sharing, and loving. That sounds good, doesn't it? But I really hadn't thought about the fact that I needed to be that way myself, if I was going to be part of such a community. Nor did I really think about what I would need to do to become that way. In fact, I was so self-centered and egoed out about myself, I figured I was already spiritual and virtually perfect. Wrong again. As I have said, all selfish selves would just love to be the only selfish person in a community full of unselfish people who just give to them all the time and don't give them a hard time about their selfish qualities. Keep dreaming. On about my third day at the monastery, during one of my first courses with elder student Haggie, we spoke of the issue, but I didn't get it at the time. Some people think they can get everything they need themselves, from books, seminars, and life. And that may be true. It may not be true. Or it just might be a matter of speed or beating the odds. Everyone needs a true teacher at some point in their spiritual path to help them see beyond themselves and get beyond themselves, because the selfish, separate self is you until you're enlightened. So it knows your every move before you take it, and it will outwit you at every attempt to transcend it, if all you have is your separate self to rely on for your spiritual growth. Everyone also has all kinds of excuses why they don't want a teacher or need one. And of course they can use legitimate and reasonable excuses, because there are many false teachers, which provides the right rationalization to their self's feelings of avoidance. But the real reason most people don't like the idea of having a teacher has nothing to do with whether the alleged teacher is a legitimate enlightened being or a charlatan. In fact, most people prefer charlatans, because there are no real threat to the selfish, separate self. Whatever category you fall into, at least open your mind temporarily and read this chapter before you close your mind back up again, putting your mind back on the shelf along with this book. Maybe it will help you understand what true teachers are all about and how they can be a tool to help you attain your goals. How can you defeat your enemy when it is you? Haggie went on. Once a person has realized that their personal enemy, and the great enemy of humankind, is the separate self and the selfishness that it spawns, what then? They can choose to walk the path of unselfish love. Then what? They can study books, meditate, use various techniques for growth or whatever, but there is a primary problem that supersedes any of these. The selfish, separate self does not want to relinquish control to the inner self, universal spirit. And more than that, the very nature of achieving universal consciousness means that the separate, selfish self will cease to exist as an independent entity. It will die, so to speak. So it will fight like a cornered animal for its survival. It will intellectually maneuver like a world-class chess champion to win the battle. It will use more clever trickery and deceit than the world's best con man. Before you can really get anywhere spiritually, you must first fully realize that the separate self has control over the brain, the desires, the emotions, etc. It has control over a person's entire life. So if you do anything that so much as threatens your separate self, it will use the things it controls against you. It knows when you're attempting to dethrone it, and it is fantastically clever in its ways to keep control and maintain the illusion of separateness. It will fight your attempts to take control of your life, or to put control of your life in the hands of the universal spirit. It won't fight fair either. And it's already an easy task for it, because it simply needs to trick you a little. So again, everyone needs a true teacher at some point in their path. A teacher that won't let the separate self get away with anything. I understand all that, Raga, but why do you say we need a teacher? Why can't we just get everything we need to change from books and life and meditation? How can you say you understand all that? You obviously haven't even heard a word I said. It has fallen on deaf ears. Listen to me with your inner voice, not your separate self-brain. It first filters everything you perceive, including my words, and the filter is your ego, your selfish separate self. The separate self is so clever, it can even use your own desire to change to keep you trapped. If it knows you're interested in growing spiritually, what do you think it'll do? What would you do? What do you do? It can and will accommodate you. Sure, it will allow you to read books, etc. In fact, it will have you read books, go to the latest mediums and channels, and hop from one growth method to another, one fad to another. Let you get immersed in religion, whatever, as long as what you do or get involved with doesn't really threaten the selfish separate self's control or existence. Even if you're working real hard at it and doing everything you can to achieve enlightenment, you can perpetually be doing everything you seemingly can to enlighten yourself, and be getting absolutely nowhere other than getting a head full of great spiritual rationalizations for the separate self to use in defending itself. You can spin your wheels forever, but in reality, you aren't doing everything you can unless you utilize the services of a true teacher, a clear mirror for which you can see the reflection of your own selfishness. Why do you need to see your selfishness? Doesn't it just go away as you learn more and achieve higher consciousness? There are a lot of people out there who are still totally selfish, even though they have a great deal of knowledge and experience in spiritual and metaphysical matters. These people know many meditation techniques and personal growth methods, and perhaps use them. They think because of all that, they are of higher consciousness. Naturally, the separate self lets them go for it, and it even pats them on the back for doing so well and being so spiritual. I guess it depends on how you define higher consciousness, but to me and the ancient teachings, such knowledge and experience doesn't mean you have higher consciousness, any more than knowing how to build a house means that you actually have built a house, or even have a house. He was right, of course, and the only reason I was avoiding seeing it was because of my separate self's fear and control over me, which I allowed with my free will, even though it was subconscious at the time. So how do you know when you're kidding yourself? There are several ways. Here's a simple premise to think about. How can someone be of higher consciousness if they lack unselfish love and kindness? I've met many people with lots of spiritual, metaphysical knowledge, who are still normal, selfish people. They may even be relatively kind and giving, ordinarily, but unkind and selfish when kindness and giving requires any real self-sacrifice or gets in the way of what they want. On the other hand, I've met truly kind and giving people who are metaphysically ignorant. They might think karma is some kind of new car wax if it weren't explained to them. Yet they're kind and giving. And they may really understand and believe in what karma actually means. You reap what you sow, in a very real sense. Even though they don't even know the word, they may really know much more than some New Age jive talker, and be of real higher consciousness than someone giving spiritual seminars. So who is really of higher consciousness? Let's say your house gets destroyed by a tornado. Who would you like as a neighbor? Someone who would help you rebuild it, give you shelter or food? Or someone who will patronizingly inform you that you attracted the misfortune to yourself, then drive off and leave you in the dust of their Mercedes as they rush off to attend another seminar on prosperity, which is likely to be nothing more than learning black magic visualization techniques disguised as a making money happen program? Who's more spiritually evolved here? True prosperity is something you can take with you when you die, and it only comes when you give through unselfish love. Back to Raja's lecture, which was stabbing me in the heart of my ego. If a person has attained universal consciousness, they, by the very nature of that, cannot be simultaneously selfish. And if a person is still selfish, they cannot be one with universal spirit, or have universal consciousness. Many people's spirituality excludes this simple fact, and many use sophisticated spiritual rationalizations to actually maintain their selfish separate self. Mirror, mirror on the wall. Raga, I said challengingly, other than your own opinion, are there any actual specific teachings of the Atlantean children of the Law of One that talk about this alleged great wall of self-trickery? Oh, very many, young novice. They say that you must have an in-the-flesh teacher who is a clear mirror that will, 1, reflect your thoughts, feelings, and actions back to yourself accurately, so you can see through self-delusion, and 2, be a mirror that shows you yourself, whether you want to see yourself or not, whether you look in it or not. In other words, one that makes you look at yourself, even when you avoid seeing yourself by self-trickery. So you're talking about a magic mirror? Gosh, you don't want to get this, do you? Such a clear mirror is a true teacher. The teachings make it absolutely clear that the final stage in a person's evolution back to oneness with the universal spirit is to find and use a true teacher to see themselves so they can really change. This is what a true teacher is for. Such teachers are enlightened masters who have purged their own programming and selfishness and become clear mirrors. What is an unclear mirror? Nearly everyone else on earth other than a true teacher. Everyone you meet reflects you back to yourself and gives you a chance to see yourself. But the reflection comes back distorted by whatever problems the mirror has. In the case of human mirrors, the distortion will come from the person's own programming, beliefs, prejudice, etc. All these things make for a warped mirror, like those in a fun house, and will reflect back a distorted view of yourself. Even someone you may respect and who you have received good spiritual or philosophical teachings from can only offer you very limited help in your spiritual journey, if they are still unclear, distorted mirrors. If you don't want to delude yourself, deceive yourself, then you need an enlightened spiritual teacher. Otherwise, yourself will always figure out ways to ultimately avoid having your separate illusion exposed and dissipated. If growth is what you really want, there is nothing that compares to having a true teacher. No meditations, no methods, no exercises, no words, no ideas, no mediums or channels, no psychics will do by themselves. Again, the teachings of the Atlantean children are very strong on this point. You must, at some point, have a teacher if you are to proceed beyond a certain point on your path. The teachings do say there are very rare exceptions, but that there is less than 1 in a billion chance to succeed otherwise, although that may change in the very near future as the coming changes present new opportunities and create forced internal spiritual changes for some. Maybe you'll be the first to really do it by yourself, young novice. Nope, no such luck. Learn instead of burn. Later, once I'd finally given up trying to avoid it and found my true teacher, Zayn, we had some great conversations. One time I had a wonderful talk with him about the various ways of learning, growing, and working toward enlightenment, which pertain to this chapter. Father, what is the best way to learn, and how can we know who to listen to and who not to? It is said that a wise man listens and learns from the wise and the fool. We can and should learn from anyone and everyone, and from life itself. Everything attempts to teach us, and we can learn if we are open. Also, we can learn things from the school of hard knocks, life experience. Unfortunately, that is the way most people learn. And I only say unfortunately because it is the slowest and most painful way. We can learn more easily by osmosis, sort of absorbing by contact from the experience of others. In this way, we can benefit from the lessons already learned by others who either went through the school of hard knocks or learned from osmosis also. This is the easiest, fastest, and most wise way to learn. For instance, if we see someone getting burned by putting their hand in the fire, we can also learn from that, rather than also putting our hand in the fire to learn that it burns. Or, in another kind of example, if we spend time around a great chef, we're likely to pick up on their knowledge and skills, as opposed to spending years experimenting with cooking ourselves, burning things, making terrible-tasting food, etc. The experiences of others can be ours if we're open to it. To learn by osmosis from the experience of an unselfishly loving, universally conscious, clear mirror is the absolute easiest and best way to learn and grow spiritually. The circle and the spiral. Reincarnation creates a situation in which people with karmic ties keep coming back into each other's lives. For instance, your mother may have played many roles in various past lives. Your sister, friend, daughter, a romantic rival, wife, or lover. As was mentioned earlier, in the book Initiates of the Atlantean Children of the Law of One, who have not ascended, permanently left the physical bodies of the earth plane behind, have reincarnated time and time again throughout the world. they keep coming back, picking up where they left off, continuing on to serve the light and the seekers of the light. Father, speaking of learning from the experience of others and of clear mirror teachers, I have heard it said that the Dalai Lama continues to reincarnate, and as the same person, in the same position. Is this true? Most assuredly, and not just the Dalai Lama. Other higher conscious Buddhist teachers do this also. That is their way. What do you mean, their way? Our tradition does something very similar, yet somewhat differently. When a teacher leaves this earth and chooses to reincarnate, the inner self and outside influences and circumstances compels him to become who he was in his past, i.e., to regain the same level of consciousness that he previously had. This applies to any enlightened teacher of the path. In ours, the initiate who does this is inwardly compelled to find other initiates of the children again and return to a monastery for the period of re-initiation, relearning, re-enlightenment. And other initiates look for the reincarnated, re-initiated adept, who is to again become a true teacher of our order. Again, this is done in many traditions in various ways. Like you found me, or vice versa, or both. Yes. When do you start looking, and how long does it take to be re-initiated or become enlightened again? This generally occurs before age 21, and will occur whether the reincarnated true teacher is yet aware of who he is or was or not. Often, a teacher will not be conscious of who they are when they are young, and will only begin coming conscious of their true self sometime between the age of 14 and 21. Nevertheless, their enlightenment will occur by 21. This is universal law, and applies to everyone. What about those who weren't enlightened, or aren't one of the spiritual traditions who do this? Regardless of whether you are one of the children or not, or enlightened or not, whatever your consciousness level of spiritual consciousness attained was, when you died in your previous life, you attain that same level of consciousness again, around age 21. This is unavoidable. And then what? From that point of regaining previous adult consciousness, one can make spiritual progress or regress. Editor's note: this means a person can achieve enlightenment at any age. Why do some enlightened teachers return and some don't? Because it's their choice. Some of the children continue to return to the earth plane to help others free themselves from the illusion of separation. Others wish to join their like kind on the higher planes. Some grow very weary and finally wish to leave, like me. You're going to leave? Not yet. Relax. You will be a teacher off on your own before I go. And you won't come back? No. Will I ever see you again? See me with eyes? No. Once you finally move on from here, perhaps. Why only perhaps? Aren't we connected somehow? Most definitely. But if you stay a great deal longer, I will still be moving on with my own evolution in the order of things. If it is too long, we will not be next to each other in the chain, but we will always be one within the chain. What about me? You said I will be a true teacher. Yes. So I will be enlightened before I'm 21? Perhaps 21, thereabouts. Do you know if I'll come back? No. That's for you to decide. That's your free will choice. You said earlier something about our tradition doing things a bit differently than the Buddhists, as far as teachers reincarnating. What's different about it? What you've described all sounds the same. Those of us who do this life after life take turns, helping us find each other again before age 21. This is similar to what is done in Tibetan Buddhism by the Dalai Lama and other higher conscious lamas. However, the Tibetan Buddhists generally start younger because of their unique social structure. A group of Buddhist monks identifies the child who is the incarnation of the Dalai Lama, or whomever they're looking for. Then, once they're positive they have the right being, the child enters a monastery to begin training, to take his place in the order once again. Teachers of the children of the Law of One, however, don't necessarily return to the same position, same land, or same race even. They are all over the world, fitting into many places, many guises, and need various backgrounds for their chosen destiny. So it's not so simple to get them back as children. You can imagine what would happen if some guy showed up at a modern Jewish couple's apartment in New York City and said they're there to take their baby to Tibet with them because they're so-and-so, the reincarnated old adept and true teacher. Yeah, how do you say 20 years to life in Tibetan or Yiddish? You get the point. Nevertheless, we are looked after from on high, and still physically located before age 21, so we can begin the work that brings us back to full consciousness of oneness by the time we reach 21. It was different in the old days, and more like it is for the Tibetans. But even modern times are beginning to change things for them, and they will find their teachers being born in other lands, and may eventually be faced with similar issues as ours. But don't forget, there are many with high consciousness, who are of our order or our path, who may not have achieved final initiation yet. Thus, they may still come into your life or vice versa, even though it's not by the time they're 21. Remember, they're still at some stage of development, some stage of initiation towards the final one. That's why there are 22 cards in the deck depicting the stages of initiation, and there will be 22 chapters in the book you will write. Even the one who is at stage 1, the Fool, is just as important a soul as any, and the Fool is both the beginning and ending. To be enlightened also means to be a fool for God. I will remember, Father. In my case, I was found, or did the finding, through that weird TV broadcast. As you're probably aware of by this time, Zayin became my personal teacher. It was he I saw on TV. Once I got to know him well, I asked him more about the broadcast. Father, do you know how I got here? I mean, I saw you on TV, on a TV station that didn't exist, couldn't exist, on a TV band that isn't, and wasn't even ever used. But I know I didn't imagine it. You didn't imagine it, Peniel. It was a broadcast that was just for you. You were the only one who saw it, the only one that came, the only one it was for. How did it happen? Through magic? In a way. Many things, including science magic, were involved. There were friends of ours in the area at the time, who had friends involved with a more open-minded Christian church there. Our friends were wise in the ways of modern technology. They made a broadcast of a recording made of me here. It was illegal there to make the broadcast they did, but they believed nothing would come of it because it was going to be so short. Nevertheless, they had a backup. They said because it was from the basement of their church, they were protected by other laws. They were guided as to the timing and all other factors, so that I would be seen by you, and find you, and you would find me, even though I was thousands of miles away at the time. Do you know I was about to kill myself? At the time, it was both yes and no, K-N-O-W. We were given to understand that the timing was critical. And because of who you are, you had to be contacted in that way, at that time. Who I am? Who am I? And who are you, that this would be so extreme? You are very special, Peniel. You have no idea how special, because you think you are so special. Huh? I later discovered that we are all special. We just need to transcend our selfish separate self, take our place in the chain of the One, and become a vehicle for, a servant of, the Universal Spirit. He went on to tell me more of how teachers of the children found each other, especially ones with special links to each other. As Zayn spoke of how he and I had helped each other, taught each other, and worked together, past life memories flooded back to me like I was in a movie. But they were in fragments, like the movie had been edited by a chimp. He also told me of some of my ties and times with the Grand Master. Zayn and I had particularly strong karmic ties, and were sometimes like two sides of a coin. We each had different qualities that ordinarily would make for unlikely friends, but actually complemented our abilities to help others when we worked together. In many ways we were like night and day, very different personalities, talents, and skills. Yet there were also many similar talents, skills, loves, and qualities. Most importantly, we were on the same team. We'd always fought in our own ways for the light, justice, truth, and freedom. We had a deep respect and appreciation for each other that few could ever understand. It was as it is always, through so many lifetimes. He seemed to admire me like a good son, brother, best friend, and father, and I him. But it wasn't always so. When I first arrived at the monastery and set eyes on him, he terrified me. I avoided him like the plague. I was still under the strong influence of my selfish separate self. But we'll cover all that in a bit. First, let's finish the subject at hand. Ancient teachers of the children of the Law of One finding each other before age 21. Throughout the ages, it was the same situation over and over again. I, as a teacher, would be found by a young man who may have been my teacher before, and vice versa. It didn't matter which was which or who was who. We were all part of the One, going through revolving doors. Sometimes we would even be members of the same biological family, but usually not, and it mattered not. So it was that I, through this process, my destiny, my spiritual pursuits and training, ultimately returned again to universal consciousness at age 21. Myself, what I had previously thought was me as a child, sort of died at age 21, and subsequently was reborn as a servant of the One Universal Spirit and Universal Will. Along with the death of my illusion of separateness, my beliefs, intellectual processes, and programming were all transformed at the same time. Essentially, my separate self, the independent thing I had given life to, which maintained my separateness from the universe, died. It ceased to exist as a separate self, but only for a moment. It was more like a metamorphosis, like a caterpillar seeming to die to become a butterfly. My old separate self was only like a bubble of illusions that surrounded me and kept my consciousness separate from the universe and my true self locked inside me. Once that bubble burst, my real self, the inner self, being part of the universal one, was all that was left of me then, and so, freed, I could again see the world anew, through eyes that see beyond this world, and to again play my part as one of the instruments in the grand orchestra of the One. Editor's note. Again, a person can achieve enlightenment at any age. Okay, I'm going to stop there because it is getting close to top of the hour. Maybe run over a little bit, I'm not sure yet. And I hope you're enjoying this. I certainly am, as I've said several times. And please remember that Haggie Shack Radio and Wolf Spirit Radio are both totally listener-supported. So, if you like what you hear, please remember to hit that donate button and give what you can. Thank you very much. Thank you all for listening. See y'all later. Bye now.